Welcome to yet another episode of our current affairs program, The Platform, a program in which we discuss topical issues. I am Kasuja Onyonyi. In a bid to identify the knowledge gaps within the Constitution, an organization recently carried out a survey, a baseline survey, in which these things came out vividly. We are privileged to host Mr. Agri Otieno. Welcome, Agri.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Agri Otieno is the chairman of the International Fellowship Program Alumni Association in Kenya. Probably at the outset, Mr. Otieno, walk us through a little bit synoptically about the Alumni Association.
Yeah, the International Fellowship Program Alumni Association is made up by individuals who were supported by Ford Foundation International Fellowship Program to go abroad in various countries. And they went for their master's and PhD programs, and now they are back. So in a nutshell, that is the Alumni Association that we are having, that I chair.
Yes. You recently did some baseline survey on the information gaps about the Constitution. Probably at this point, we would like to know what are the parameters that you are looking into and what were the findings?
One of the things is this baseline survey targeted 8 counties that are within the 8 regions in Kenya, the 8 provinces that we have. And out of these 8 countries, we targeted 1,601 people. And some of the things that we wanted to know is, do Kenyans really know that we have a new constitution, for example? And we realized that only 95.5% knew that we have a new constitution. 4.5% don't know. They have no idea. Then when we looked at these 95.5% people, how well do they understood the Constitution? And we were focusing in 3 main chapters of the Constitution: a chapter that deals with the devolved government, a chapter that deals with representation, and a chapter that deals with the executive. And we realized that only 7% of Kenyans feel comfortable that they've really read and understand the Constitution well. The rest, they've just read some bits and some parts of the Constitution, and that made up around 54%. So that's a very worrying trend for us. Then we also looked at the age. Which age categories in the country do really understand the Constitution, and realized as the age increases, the capability to understand the Constitution also lowers.
Why?
So one is that the youth are a little bit more literate if you compare to the rest of the population. And then the youth at the moment, they're a little bit more empowered than the youth of in the past. And because of this, they want to get involved in the governance of the country. Because in most cases, they've been told that they're the leaders of tomorrow. But now youths are telling people that we are the leaders of today. So because of that, they have to understand the Constitution well. So probably that's one of the reasons that makes youth to understand it. Then we also looked at occupation. We realized that the more you advance in the ladder of employment, then the better you understand the Constitution. And I think this one is related to the professions that people have. We realized some are lawyers, some are teachers, some are community development workers. So because of that, people want to read some aspects of the Constitution that touches on their professional lives. But we also realized that other categories like farmers, businessmen, to some extent, they don't really understand the Constitution. And this also includes the unemployed category. Then so we also looked at the gender. We realized that men are doing better than women. So that's another thing. In as much as we are talking about affirmative action, creating opportunities for women, we've realized that a lot of women are still not reading the Constitution.
Is it that men have so much time to read the Constitution as opposed to that available to women?
I think probably time, to some extent, can be an explanatory factor, because you'll find that women, they do a lot of domestic chores at home. They have to tend for kids, they have to go to the farm, they have to go to informal, for example, they are hawkers, so they don't have time to read. Then the issue of literacy also plays some role in it. So because of that, even if you've given them copies of the Constitution, some of them have told us that it is very voluminous, according to them, so they don't. And maybe it also reflects the culture of Kenyans of not having a reading culture. Yes. So because of this, that also, to some extent, impacts on people actually reading and understanding the Constitution.
I also got to understand that certain counties of the 8 that you pioneered, there's some variation in terms of understanding. What is the cause of the variation? And which county is at which level?
That's a good question. You know, in most cases, people normally assume that counties that are within the urban centers are doing well. For example, Nairobi.
That is what everybody would assume. I mean,
Nairobi is a capital city, and it's a county also.
And it's the hub of literacy.
It's lagging behind in terms of reading and understanding the Constitution. That was very surprising. It is almost in the same level with Kwale, because Kwale, Garissa, and Nairobi, in terms of those who've actually read the Constitution.
Did you, in your own initiative, try to find out why this is? Because Nairobi has the highest number of literate people, and probably could be a very high number of illiterate people. Because if you want to attribute it to a number of slum people. People live in slum and they have gone to school.
Yes.
And slums have schools. Is it the Nairobians are too busy to have a look at this document?
I think a number of factors come into play here. One is time. Probably Nairobians feel that they are so busy hustling to make a living than reading a constitution. We don't want to waste time reading a constitution.
Yes.
So probably that also explains. The other thing is that when we looked at the demographic factors within these counties, so Nairobi to some extent realized that those who are a little bit elderly, they are so busy selling stuff, being business people or working in their own respective places of work. So because of this, that is why you find that youth are the only population that are actually comfortable to say that we've read and you have understood the Constitution. So that also plays. But again, probably because we are also looking at the marginalized communities, and this research to some extent also was a little bit biased towards those who are from the slum areas, though we also try to transcend by also covering those that are a little bit middle class and up. But again, one thing that is coming very clearly is that people are not reading the Constitution. And probably those who are from the middle class, time factor. They're also busy with other things.
Another people have said that the Constitution is very difficult to read, and that two issues deter them from reading the document. One, is quite voluminous, and two, the language used is very legalistic, and that they can hardly make head or tail from it. What do you say to this?
Yeah, that is one of the things that women from these marginalized communities were telling us, is that this constitution is voluminous. But again, even if it is voluminous, if you compare with the kind of stuff that you read in school, you used to read a lot of textbooks. So to me, that is not a reason per se. But at the same time, people also say that the legal jargons that are used there scare them, that they cannot read it. And that is why, as we are going a niche higher in terms of probably later on in the program, I'll explain what we are doing to address these kind of issues. But I think those two key issues that we've identified, I concur with you.
As a scholar, because you are a beneficiary of this scholarships from Ford Foundation, you've mentioned that we read so many books in school. Those books were conditioned. The Constitution is optional.
Yes.
Would you say that the kind of system that we have is tailor-making people to cramming and passing exams and does not inculcate the culture of reading amongst us?
Yeah, Kenyans have always been accused of not having a reading culture.
What do you attribute this to? Is it the syllabus? Is it the system of education we have, or what?
The system, to some extent, we have not done a research on this, but if I just say is that the system, people have accused it to be a system that make people to cram for exams. So when you are not having an exam, you
abandon your books.
And sometimes you even try to guess which area, which aspect of the questions are going to be examined on a certain textbook. So even those textbooks, you'll find that people are working with very voluminous textbooks, but they're not reading the whole of it.
You did mention Kwale as an example of an area that is really lagging behind in terms of information gaps in the Constitution. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, Kwale, we realized that these people, they rely on the word of mouth.
So reason being, the Constitution was distributed countrywide. Did they have copies of the Constitution?
Yeah, that's another factor. We are asking ourselves, did they really access the copies? And if they accessed it, did they read it? And if they read it, did they understand it? So so many issues come up. Understanding, accessing the materials and stuff. Another thing is that we have cultural practices. People normally look at individuals within the community, like village elders, as people who are opinionated. They are people who understand stuff, things that happens on a contemporary basis. And because of this, when themselves they've not read the Constitution, but at the same time you have to show yourself as the person who's more knowledgeable in the community, they end up giving people information. And as they give people information, other community members feel that now they've gotten the information. And in most cases, they get information that has been distorted. So probably that also explains why Kwale lagged behind in terms of understanding the real contents of the Constitution that we have.
Would you confidently say that, to a very large extent, translation of the Constitution into local dialects would help people internalize the document?
Yes, it will. And again, and that is why even the media and the community medias and these local medias are coming into play in terms of trying to make people to understand the Constitution using these local dialects. And at the same time, there's also need for publishing documents that are translated in various languages, Giriama, Luo, Kikuyu, etc. At the same time, there's also need of having a good public education campaign with people who are more objective enough so that they can teach people the real contents of the new Constitution that we have. So I think all these activities, if they come into play, then the level of understanding the Constitution will go up.
I know in the scholarly world, baseline surveillance are largely accepted, but as you've listened to this country, a number of people really cast doubt on the authenticity of some of these surveys. If I were to ask you an hypothetical question, why the 1,601? And what did you specify the kind of social group that you are targeting?
One is, as I explained earlier, we targeted counties within the 8 provinces in Kenya, because these 80 provinces are the provinces that is Kenya.
Yes.
And because of that, we made sure that Nairobi, for example, is an Nairobi province, so we gave it a slot, 1 county. You go to Rift Valley, it is a little bit geographically wider, so we had more counties coming from Rift Valley province. We went to Coast province, and that, because of that, we ended up having 8 counties in total. And within these 8 counties, we tried to look at disability issues, trying to target people who are disabled, trying to target people who are HIV, AIDS, for example, trying to target people who are from low-income communities, and we assume that in low-income communities, you'll find a number of people, especially those mamas who've not gone to school, or probably they have basic knowledge in school. So what we did during our sampling is that we were a little bit stratified, and at the same time trying to randomize our data gathering. So because of that, we are making use of scientific tools that gather knowledge. And because of that, we can now say confidently that out of the 1601 people that participated in this survey, they represented the voice of the people in the country.
What would you say about the civic education? Because it also plays a very pivotal role in terms of disseminating and synthesizing this document to the locals. How far has it been pulverized into the local communities?
You know, for one, people we've done civic education. Civic education is so wide.
Yes.
In most cases, during electioneering period, you'll see people and many organizations coming
I mean civic education in this context for the constitution alone, yes.
So I can say we are the first organization in the country that is going to do civic education on the constitution per se. In most cases, people do civic education in terms of voting.
Yes.
This is how we vote, and this is what we do. So, and that is why we wanted to do a baseline survey, so that we can measure the impact of our project that we are having. At the same time, it also guides us in terms of identifying the actual needs and also knowing the target groups. For example, now we know that if you go to Kwale, this is how you approach it. If you go to Nairobi, this is how you approach it. And at the moment, we have a very big civic education project that targets 16 counties in the country. And in this project, we've done the baseline survey. At the same time, we are going to identify a number of people, 60 people who are our own members, and then 16 community representatives who will come to Nairobi so that they get trained on all this. They know the gaps that we have. They know the constitution. We've already simplified the constitution in a manner that a layman person can understand it. So we'll train these people on this with the assumption that when they go back to their own counties, they'll train more people. For example, the people will be representing Nairobi County in that training forum. They'll come back to Nairobi, identify other people from all the constituencies that we have in Nairobi, and then they train them. So these community members who've been trained by us will go back to their community constituencies and start doing training, education, working around using multi-strategy-pronged strategy, different channels, including media, and also community radio station that we have, and also development of information, education, and communication materials, which include posters. And you put it very well early on that we need to translate these things
into
in a language
dialects.
that people understand.
People can easily understand.
And because of that, you'll see, like in Nairobi, some of the radio programs that we'll be having will be in Sheng, for example, to target those youth.
The urban youth.
If you go to Kwale, we have a community radio there that will use the local dialect that people understand. So that is what we are doing. At the same time, we are making use of people from those communities who understand the dynamics of these communities and also understand the language so that they can translate and give them objective and well-balanced information about the Constitution.
I want to draw you back to the 4% who say they understand nothing about the Constitution. They are not even aware that such a document exists. If there is a time that this country realized what we call the cumulative effect theory of the mass media, is during the referendum. Virtually every media house was awash with the constitutional matters. What reason did these people say or give for their not understanding of the existence or availability of this document?
One thing is geographical coverage. You'll find that some of these communities that we targeted are very far away from each other. For example, pastoral communities, they're on the move all the time. So most of them won't move along with television, for example. Then you go to other areas that you've realized that they receive newspapers one week later when it's already stale. So all those factors, in as much as the mainstream media really played a key role in giving people information, but at the same time, people didn't really access it. And when they access it, it was stale, for example, the newspapers. And when it is stale, you don't have any interest in reading it. And again, during the referendum, politicians came out very strongly. Either you are in yes or you are in no. And most people, for example, in Kwale, we realize that they depend on one on word mouth. So because of that, they look at the opinion leaders, the political leaders, and they say, if so-and-so have said that this constitution is good, then it is good.
So be it.
If so-and-so says it's bad, it's bad.
Multi-sectoral approach to this is inevitable for it to succeed.
Yes.
I wonder how close you want to partner with other like-minded organizations so that you cascade the information about the Constitution to each and every individual that is earmarked.
Yeah, that is a very key point you brought in, because they usually say in Kiswahili, huwezi uachawa na kidole kimoja. So this is an opportunity for other organizations and other partners also to come to us so that we can partner together in giving civic education to the public. But at the same time, we've also been reaching out to other organizations whom we think that we can work with closely in terms of training people, in terms of disseminating information. And I'm so happy that KBC have started already, because we are talking here and people are listening to this program.
Yes.
So that's a very good thing that you brought up.
You looked at 3 chapters in the Constitution that you are sampling about. Can you walk us through how the performance was in each of the chapters? There was a chapter on devolution.
Yes.
There's a chapter, 2 other chapters that probably walk us through.
Yes. One of the things that we realized, for example, in devolved government chapter 11 of the Constitution, what is the basis of the county government, for example? Just asking basic things to see if people really understand that now we're going into a new devolved system of governance. And in this, 55.7% of Kenyans say that it's the county government that becomes the basis of. But again, you look at others are mentioning district, others are mentioning province. This means that they still don't understand the composition of the county government that we have. Then when you look at who's going to preside in the county governance, some of them, they rightly put it that it's the speaker, and we really appreciated that. I don't know, maybe they thought so long as it is something to do with county parliament, then it's national parliament, so they could easily connect it.
Yes.
And then when we looked at the gender of people, those who well understand the composition of the county government in the country, we still realize that male have more knowledge than women again. So probably the earlier factors that we talked about are coming into play. And then when it comes into gazetting of issues that emanate from the county government, so many people didn't know that they have to be gazetted so that they can really be actualized. So in terms of county government, Nairobi, they are aware that Nairobi is a Nairobi county.
Because the governors are always...
The governor is here, and they've started campaigning very strongly. So because of that, also to some extent, made people to be aware that now we have a county, Nairobi County.
Agri will be taking a short break at this moment, and when we come back, we'll be looking at the different clawbacks that we are realizing now of the constitutional improvements, as well as the regional performance areas that you focused on. Viewer, we are speaking to Mr. Agri Otieno on the topic matter, knowledge gaps in the Constitution. And as he puts it, we are not doing very well in the capital city. For more information, stay with us. Welcome back. We are speaking to Mr. Agri Otieno on the knowledge gaps in the Constitution. Agri, you talked about translating the Constitution in local dialects for ease of understanding. The challenge that people might say here is that you might not translate it in the real context and therefore mislead the public with these documents. How will you ensure that whatever you translate does conform to what was written initially in the Constitution?
That's a very good question. One, I would like to tell the viewers that within the Alumni Association, we have people who come from different professional backgrounds. We have lawyers, for example, and these lawyers have gone to the extent of studying the Constitution, studying the gaps that came from this baseline survey that we have, and after identifying them, then they come up with information that addresses those gaps. So we believe that the spirit and letter of the Constitution is not going to be missed during the translation process. But in most cases, most of the materials are going to be translated into Kiswahili, because Kiswahili is a national language that everybody else understands. But then at the same time, you're also going to make use of media. So we'll be bringing in professionals, lawyers who know Kiswahili. If it is in Kwale, for example, people are speaking in Giriama. So we are going to bring a lawyer who is a Giriama person. And we believe that by the virtue that he has gone through training and understand the Constitution so well, then he's not going to miss or mistranslate the Constitution. So those are some of the techniques that we are making use to make sure that people don't distort information further.
Agri, I want us to look at chapter 5 of the Constitution from two perspectives. One, in terms of passing legislation, passing acts that will operationalize it. And two, living to the spirit and letter of that particular chapter. How practical is this?
One, we can say that there's a lot of draftsmanship that is involved in drafting these acts. And because of that, probably people have not been used to this kind of work within limited time limits,
yes.
So probably they are overworked. So that is just one conjecture. But the other thing is that this is a whole political process, and a lot of political interests are coming into play, and probably they could be strategically making sure that a number of things are not going according to how it needs to be done. So I think because of a lot of political interests that we have, so to some extent, it might be delaying some of the acts that were supposed to be in place.
But don't you think you as civic bodies are really late in sensitizing the public on their particular role of participating in some of this discourse?
One, I can say to some extent in terms of drafting the acts, I know a number of pockets from the civil society voices have been there in terms of trying to educate the member of communities so that they could also make sure that the government and the parliamentarians are up to date in terms of making these acts being passed in the parliament. But at the same time, I can say that those pockets of voices have not been strong enough. And I can admit that a lot have not been done, especially when it comes to empowering communities to defend their constitutional rights.
And would I be right to say that the Lone Ranger system that deployed by most of the civic bodies is largely derailing some of the programs that would have been very beneficial, like what you want to do? Honestly, is a very good activity. But doing it collectively would make much impact and realize more goals than a single run.
Yes, and I want to point out that within this project, if you look at the profile of different members that you have, some of our members are people who work within the civil society. And these civil societies are dealing with issues to do with governance. So to some extent, we cannot say that it is only us as an individual IFP that is doing this. So in the long run, if you look at the structure of the projects and the kind of people that we are partnering at the community level, then they runs into so many organizations, including community-based organizations that are doing this. So to some extent, we'll say that we've identified from the word go that you cannot work alone. You have to work with others so that you make sure that communities are empowered.
But Agri, is one thing to undertake such an activity of civic education, and one thing to ensure that the purpose for which it was done is realized. How do you intend to gauge the level of penetration or the level of percolation of this message among the targeted group?
Yes, and that is why we did the baseline survey. We realized that most of the organizations, when they want to come up with interventions, they've not, probably due to lack of resources and time, they've not done baseline survey. But as we've committed a lot of time, you can imagine this project started in September. But now we are talking about the baseline survey. That means that a lot of time and resources, which include financial resources, have been put into this. And this baseline survey has made us to know which county is performing better than the other. And within this county, what kind of channels do they use to get information? And what kind of, what parts of the Constitution don't they understand? So that when we are coming up with interventions, we direct it to where it is needed most. And then at the same time, baseline survey is for identifying indicators and parameters in which you can monitor a project. So this document is going to help us as we are implementing the project. We have a lot of evaluation and monitoring mechanisms that we are going to put into work. One of them being process evaluation, like any other organization will do. But other than that, we have mid-term evaluation, so that we'll be evaluating and ask ourselves, are we really targeting the real people? Are we giving people the message that actually are making them understand the Constitution better? And if not, then we are going to change strategies mid-course. And if all is well, then the project ends and we do impact evaluation to see, do we really address the issues that people said that were concerns to them? So I can say that we've put all those structures and mechanisms in place to make sure that when we come up with messages and interventions that addresses the needs of the people, which in this case, addressing the gaps that the people have identified that they wish to know more about the contents of the Constitution.
A universal program, probably in terms of the methodology of delivering this message, might not work. Because if you are doing it among the pastoralists, you might not just find them. Probably getting them as a group and talking to them is not easy because they're busy herding their wear.
Yes.
Now, do you intend to incorporate variety in your dissemination?
Yes, and initially I said when we are going to have the national TOT training of trainers in Nairobi, a number of people will be coming from this country, including pastoralists. So you'll find that when the pastoralist communities are moving, the same people, community members whom they work with, who are with them, are the ones who also help them to get the information from us. So to some extent, that is going to, because there'll be a lot of participation from the community itself in terms of designing the messages, like I said before, in terms of owning up the process, because in as much as we are giving intervention, helping people to know the contents of the Constitution, but at the same time, we are empowering people, communities, community-based organizations that are within these counties, so that they can also sustain the project when we are not there, in terms of training them, in terms of giving them the relevant materials, and in terms of giving them the capacity so that they can address issues as they emerge.
Mm-hmm. It is a fact, I agree, that the Constitution we have is quite voluminous, and reading through it might not be very easy for everybody, and therefore pick of snippets of areas to cascade is a welcome idea. Mm-hmm. However, are there specific areas that you want to start with in terms of the content of the Constitution? Because you cannot do it within the stipulated time, the whole of it. How do you want to roll out this?
That's true. So in our target, we are targeting 3 chapters of the Constitution. A chapter that deals with devolved government, a chapter that deals with representation, and a chapter that deals with the executive.
Why the 3?
So the 3,
one would be interested, why the 3?
Yes, one is devolved government. For example, we have a new government structure that is coming in that people have never experienced before. So we felt a need of letting them know. And again, from the baseline survey, you can easily know that a majority of people don't know that the kind of composition of county government you are going to have in place. Some of them are still talking about the president and such kind of stuff. So the other thing is the issue of representation. In terms of, you remember what happened in the year 2007.
Yes.
We don't want the same thing to happen again. And we want to educate Kenyans to know that what are the channels, for example. You have a right to go to court if you feel that somebody has been declared you are aggrieved. Right. So that is something that we really want Kenyans to know. At the same time, we want to make sure that Kenyans also know that voting is a continuous process, not a one-off thing that comes during electioneering year. And from the baseline survey, we realized that the majority of Kenyans think that it is a one-off event. The other thing is in terms of executive. And many people still don't know that what is the composition of the executive, for example. Many people are still talking about prime minister, something that is not existing in the new constitution. So that is one area that we need to educate people. Given that at the end of the day, we want people who are empowered to hold their political leaders accountable. So if you don't know who are the political leaders themselves, then who are you going to
hold accountable?
Who can hold them accountable? And at the same time, you have to know the roles and responsibilities of these individuals. So because of that, we factored on those 3 chapters.
One would have expected you to begin with the rights first, so that they understand their bills of what is enshrined in the Constitution as their right, so that by the time you're talking to them, they know they are talking from a position or knowledge.
Yes.
Why not incorporate this?
You know, that's a very valid concern. But again, in our own strategies, we've realized from the baseline survey that people are asking for that. You know, when you design a program, you design it knowing that you are going to do ABCD. But before doing actual implementation, then you do the baseline survey so that you can have, the map of how you are going to implement the project. And because of this, issues of Bill of Rights have been coming up in our discussions with people. And because of that, now we've trying to formulate our interventions so that we make sure that we also incorporate the component of Bill of Rights. But when we are doing the baseline survey, it wasn't captured there, but that issue has been coming up. And it's good that you also brought it up, and that means that Kenyans really have to know the Bill of Rights. But at the same time, we also anticipated that this can come up, and so we designed our project in such a way that when we'll be having our talk shows in the radio, when we'll be having our community forums, we bring in experts who are able to address these issues.
One of the areas that we want to look at, particularly in regard to the Constitution, is the recall clause. A number of political analysts have said that it's likely to generate a lot of heat in the August House, because there is nobody in this world who can sharpen a knife or panga that is going to be used to cut him or her. In view of this, how much preparedness is your organization, amongst others in the civic society, to help Kenyans keep an eye on watch and participate effectively and constructively in this discourse of recall?
You know, one thing is that some Kenyans didn't even know that there's a recall clause. So that is something that has emerged from the baseline survey. And that means that during our discourse with the community, when we are talking to people through the media like now, and when we are developing our information and education materials, we address that so that Kenyans know that they have a right to recall their member of parliament when they are not performing. And at the same time also to let them know the kind of procedures that they need to put in place to make sure that it takes place and under what conditions. So that's a very good point.
Mm-hmm. In this country, there is a very pivotal role that is normally played by the provincial administration, and this is in the bringing people to meetings such as the ones you want to have. And more often than not, the civic society has always been at loggerhead with the provincial administration during their civic education campaigns, under the guise that they overdo it and they, to a very large extent, confuse people, agitate people, and therefore negating the essence of law and order. What role do you want to give the provincial administration in this dispensation?
Initially, during the previous regime, before the Kibaki government came into place, provincial administration have been accused of doing other things to Kenyans that I don't want to talk about
yes.
at the moment.
But remember, they're still relevant in the dispensation we have.
Yes, yeah. That's right. And at the moment, things have been changing gradually. To some extent, I know of a lot of pieces, DOs, DCs. Some of them are my friends, and we normally talk. And at the same time, we remember the other day, the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs launched their own voter education campaign. So to some extent, there is a paradigm shift within the government in terms of thinking. And there are some space that is happening within the government in terms of doing these kind of things. And if the government is in the forefront doing it, then why can't we partner with them? And because of this, we know very well that people like Chief, they have their community barazas, and we've factored those in. And some of them are really welcoming the idea, and they're looking forward to working in partnership with us within their own respective communities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've heard you say that you, in a bid to encompass the rest of the marginalized groups, the small groups that are in the country, you might translate the Constitution into their dialect so that they might understand it easily. I'm wondering how you handle situations where some of these dialects have never been written. How would you handle that?
One, because of resources, we will not be able to translate it into as many dialects as people wish.
But in a dialect that has never been written, how do you translate it?
Yeah,
or you use translators on the floor?
Like at the moment, I can say with a lot of confidence that we are going to translate the simplified version of the Constitution into Kiswahili, because everybody else understands Kiswahili. But again, other dialects probably won't do the actual document in terms of translating the document, but we'll come up with messages that targets the gaps that we've identified from the baseline so that people can know. For example, you have a right to recall your member of parliament in a dialect that somebody can understand. So when you understand that in Doluo, for example, or in Ogiek, then there's no way somebody can distort that message. You have a right to recall your member of parliament. You have a right to vote. You have a right to register in a voting process that is continuous rather than one-off event. So those kind of messages are not prone to being distorted.
Mm-hmm. In terms of priority, I know that matters about election are most fundamental as we speak now because we're in an election year. Mm-hmm. Would you say that you'd give them first priority and give the rest a little bit of a back roll and so that you run away with them and not to be caught with the time for election?
What we can say is that we want to bring on board a number of people, and that has come out very clearly in our project design. At the same time, if you look at the membership of the Alumni Association, it is very diverse. We have people from Garissa, we have people from Turkana, we have people from Nairobi slums, and we are going to make them to reach out to these people. And during our TOT training that we are going to have, a number of these people are going to come from those very remote areas in the country to Nairobi. We are going to bring them here, build their capacity, facilitate them so that they go back into their respective communities in their own counties so that they can spread the gospel of the new constitution and the kind of information that we've identified that people need from those respective communities. So it's going to be participatory, but at the same time, we also realize that a number of groups and organizations are already operating within those counties. So those county communities, we welcome them to come on board. There are a number of them that we've already identified that we'll be working with, and they've been coming to our own forums and also building our own capacity, for example. So, in as much as you are empowering others, but you also realize that maybe you might be having some gaps in terms of human resource or in terms of financial resource. And a lot of community and partners have been coming on board so that we could work together.
What role would an ordinary Kenyan play in this dispensation?
One, it is your responsibility as a Kenyan to read and understand the Constitution well. on your own. Don't depend on other people to read the Constitution for you because you don't know their interests. Probably they'll be telling you that members of parliament cannot be recalled because they have specific interest in that. So Kenyans have a responsibility to read the Constitution. Number two, after reading the Constitution, it is the responsibility of Kenyans to make sure that the leaders that they put in place are leaders of integrity. Because if you put a leader who doesn't have integrity and they end up stealing all public resources that you have, then there's no way our country is going to develop. The other thing is that Kenyans should make sure that they hold their political leaders accountable. They should explain their deeds all the time. And also the media also, they should be the watchdog of Kenyans as a whole.
There's a percentage in your findings who have not identified any position in terms of understanding and in terms of knowing whether the Constitution exists. In your own interpretation, what does this portend to this country? Because it's almost 2 years, and this thing has largely been hyped and assumed that everybody has known about it. What does this portend to this country in terms of degree of understanding the document?
One, it's a very worrying scenario that you are having. Because if people don't understand the Constitution, it means they don't understand the kind of roles and responsibilities they've accorded, the Constitution have accorded their leaders. They don't understand the rights that have been enshrined in the new Constitution.
Yes.
For example, we have disabilities, people with a disability. Now, there are a number of them who are supposed to be in the county government, for example. So if you don't know that you're supposed to be vying for a certain seat, we have the issue of 2/3. So women are supposed to be taking up a number of positions, not only that percentage that have been catered for them, but they should also be fighting for positions with men, for example. So this Constitution empowers marginalized communities like never before. So Kenyans need to understand it very well. And if they do not understand it, then it shows me that they are not going to take advantage of the rights and freedoms that have been shined here. The other thing, it also tells me that they are not going to hold their political leaders accountable. But again, you know, this issue of integrity is very key. And if you don't know the Constitution, you don't know the kind of integrity parameters that you need to look at before voting for a person. We don't want this issue of people saying, Gonywa, for example. Give me some money so that I give you my vote. So you need to vote not with your stomach, but with your brains by understanding the Constitution so that you know this is the kind of a person who is going to address the felt needs of the community where I come from.
And therefore, I'm wondering about the youth, particularly, because they form the majority. You say that the understanding of the Constitution is a little bit higher than the rest of the group. But the women, who also have has a very large constituency in the voting bloc, you say they're not doing very well. Does it mean that men are going to, again, use their understanding and manipulation to outwit them?
That is an opportunity of that happening. Because if you don't understand the Constitution, don't know you are right, don't know how to participate in the governance of the country, then men, those who are a little bit empowered in terms of information. Information is power. So if many men have the information, the right information, they are going to take advantage of it. And women are not going to fight for their own rights. And this is a very bad situation.
But because I'm asking this the latter father that you said women are not doing very well in terms of understanding, and men are doing very well in terms of understanding and the youth. Does this therefore mean that in your civic education, you will give priority to those whose understanding are lower, or you just go universal?
No, we are not going universal, and that is the essence of having the baseline survey, because at some point during our mid-time evaluation, we are going to see, did we really target the right people? So there's no need of targeting you, for example, when you're already in power. Correct. You have the information. So you have to focus resources. You don't have a lot of resources. You have to focus resources where it is needed most. And in this case, it is needed most by women. It is needed most by those people within marginalized community who don't have time to read the Constitution. It is needed most by those people who are illiterate, who cannot, even if we give them Constitution to read, they cannot read it, but they need other forum. For example, face-to-face communication for them to understand the content of the Constitution. So this baseline survey has really taught us one thing, the people to target.
The people to target.
Yes.
We are running short of time, but in your conclusion, in the concluding remarks, what key areas and what key factors should Kenyans look out into in the new dispensation, particularly as we move towards election?
One is that we now have a document, a constitution that empowers us. We are very powerful than never before as Kenyans, and Kenyans should take advantage of this so that they can know what to do and the kind of roles to take in terms of governance. Number two, we are going to election process. We have chapter 6 of the Constitution that talks about integrity and leadership issues. Let us vote people of integrity and people who can deliver. Number 3 is that we have marginalized communities who've never taken advantage and participated in the governance of our country. This is the time for you. We have slots for women. We have slots for people with disabilities.
Youth.
We have slots for youth. And all this marginalized community, even if you are not a youth and you come from a community that has never been given an opportunity to be represented in the parliament, for example, we have a lot of communities that we've never seen them in the parliament, except when they are nominated. We want to see them being elected.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Mr. Agri-Otieno, for having found time to come and share with us your findings of the knowledge gaps in the Constitution. And as you rightly put it, every Kenyan's responsibility to ensure that this document is thoroughly understood and the benefits that for which it was drafted are all gotten. We are speaking to Mr. Agri-Otieno, who is the chairman of the International Fellowship Program Alumni Association in Kenya, on the topic matter, knowledge gaps in the Constitution. And as he rightly puts it, a responsibility of you and me to ensure that this document is put into proper use. Because for over 20 years, Kenyans had yearned for a document that stipulates on how the governed will govern them, and we came to get it about 2 years ago. Let us make good use of it and ensure that we maximize on its potential. Till we meet again on the same program, on behalf of my guest here, and on behalf of the entire platform crew, my name is Kasuja Onyonyi saying, till next week.